Real Property Tax Services Committee meeting to order. We have a motion approving the minutes of the last meeting. Motion by Dennis, second by Gene. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. So, the new business, request to amend the Bonnie County budget to play the RPS version 4, I guess, license fees to the state.
If you guys had remembered back in the spring, we did a resolution to charge back half to the town.
Yep.
However, in this year's budget, by the time we were billed at the end of last year, my budget was already set, so I didn't have enough in my portion. So what I'm looking to do is, you'll see the attached resolution, is some of the extra money that came in, I wouldn't say extra, but some of the money that came in from the towns, I would like to, it's just $370 worth, pull out of there, out of the revenue, and put it into this expense account, to be able to cover the fees.
Okay. So how much is the fees? It must be more than $370.
Oh, it is,
Yeah.
it's $15,400.
Yeah.
Yep, so, I didn't quite have it all, but I moved some out of another account into here, and then this is the additional amount that I would need to be able to cover it.
Okay. You have a motion by Supervisor McDevitt, Supervisor Dickinson. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Okay, then next is approve the bids from the tax foreclosure auction. Allow the remainder balance to be paid in full. So right now, we just have down payments on these.
We do,
Yeah.
and you'll see the attached list of, properties that were sold, the outstanding taxes, and then what they sold for. So this is just standard, every year it has to go before the board for approval.
Right. And how many is it that we wound up with total? Like 28
I believe there
or
was
something?
23.
23, okay. Okay, so we have a motion.
Okay. I'll get it on the floor, yes.
Okay,
Whatever.
motion by Supervisor
Question two.
McDevitt, second by
Yeah.
Supervisor Dickinson.
I guess
Discussion.
just a couple of questions.
Sure.
Yeah.
The second one on there with Johnsburg, the 23 Freeburn Road. You know, that, the sales price is is that $85,000? Am I
Correct.
reading that correctly?
Yes,
Okay,
you are.
good. That seems to be the biggest one on there, but I just kind of,
It is?
just make this, the taxes due versus the sales price in terms of, doesn't appear to be a lot of rhyme or reason there. You know, you go to 24 Indiana Avenue, which had a sales price of $30,000 and taxes due of $14,450. So I guess, and then the second to the Richard Galusha, the Warrensburg one, where taxes are virtually double what the sale price was. Just a general observation. It just doesn't appear to be a great deal of rhyme or reason in terms of that relationship, if there is indeed a relationship.
The one in Warrensburg used to have a residence on it that burned, so that may have caused the taxes at that time that weren't paid to be a little higher, because they were based on a residential property. And then it went over to, vacant. I'm sorry.
It's the second one, Johnsburg.
Look in the sale price column is what he's talking about.
The second
That
one,
was a townhouse that was in Johnsburg.
the second one, it just looks like that, you know, somebody didn't act fast enough to try to preserve some of their equity.
I think the people that were prior owners had some financial hardships. So there really isn't any rhyme or reason. You know, depending on the lot size, depending on what it is, as to, you know, how the taxes are derived, so.
Yeah, the other one where there's a big multiple in the sale price over the taxes is that out in Knapp Road.
Oh,
4,000 owed and 30,000 sale price.
Well, because the one off of Pilot Knob Road has a small strip that goes out to the lake. So that's going to run the sale price up.
So it's lake access.
Price
a little
higher for the bids.
Yeah.
And we explained that. The problem of it is there's a dock on it, and there's, other homes that are on Hannaford that have right-of-ways to that water besides the person who owns the lot. And I believe all the slips on the dock are being used, so it's gonna be an issue with the water area.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm. So I think the people that bid actually did do their research, because there was a few of them that were bidding on it. But I think they were aware. I also made people aware ahead of time that they were really gonna need to talk to the town of Queensbury about this, to find out if it was a buildable lot.
Okay, any other discussion? If not, call the question, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Carried. See what else we got?
Well, other issue is, or information for discussion and review in 5, which is the, discussion of the Phase 2 limited site assessments for Hague and Johnsburg. We did receive them back. We only have a preliminary on Queensbury's property, so we're not gonna discuss that one today. They're still gonna be making amendments to the report. But we do have the Hague and Johnsburg here. Fred, I believe you have a copy, and I've shared a couple
Right.
copies here. The one in the town of Hague, was a dump, or an old landfill dump. The cleanup they're estimating to be $2.84 million to clean that up.
Take that out of petty cash?
I think that's a bit more than what we might wanna spend. The market value on the property right now is only $24,700, 4.55 acres. They did a lot of the testing. It's gonna be very expensive. They found a lot of buried garbage and debris. And there was also other sites that are in the woods that they couldn't really get to test. They did do, I believe, 10, test pits. And, there was metal drums, containers, boats, 2 abandoned cars that were visible at the surface. A lot of it, like I said, was, overgrown. There was mounds of garbage existed, however, they were overgrown. So they didn't test everything. They said about a 1.25 acres, consists of brush and heavy vegetation, and consists of buried waste mass as approximately delineated in this test pit.
So this site is still owned by the town of Hague, is it?
No, it
See
is
that?
not.
I don't see that in the report.
We have
What's
temporary
owned?
incidents of ownership.
Okay.
But it was last owned by a individual. Nobody's ever taken it. The town didn't take it. It was just a dumping site kind of that people dumped on. It
So it wasn't
wasn't
an
necessarily a
official
town dump.
town
No.
dump?
It was the town landfill.
It was?
The town sold it to this, Sawyer woman, I believe,
Yeah.
in the sixties.
Yeah, Peter?
So it was the town landfill at one time.
Yeah, the number that really strikes out to me here is looking at the estimate here, is the disposal. You've almost got a $2 million item there in terms of disposal. What in heaven's name is in that soil? I mean, or is that just the marketplace that we deal with when we try to get rid of, the soil?
Well, this isn't soil,
Not-
there's garbage in there.
there's
It's
garbage
gonna have to be
buried
dug
in
up and
there.
taken someplace else, so it's not just soil.
But it just seems like a huge number to me.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
I know they say here that the, dollar amounts used for the estimate were based on the New York State DOT earthwork, pay items for the region, as well as $150 per ton of waste disposal quoted by EPS.
$150 a ton?
Mm-hmm.
You can get rid of asbestos for like $300.
Well, I'm just going on what was given to us, so.
What actually happens, in a situation like this long-term? I mean, does...
I don't know who's gonna pay that
Does
kind of-
nothing happen? I mean, just we...
Well, Mr. Chairman, I might be able to shed some light on this. What we've done, what the county has done, is the county has temporary incidents of title under Article 56 of the Environmental Conservation Law. The reason why we did that is we commenced a foreclosure action. The law allows us to obtain temporary incidents of ownership to conduct these environmental investigations. That's what you have here. You have a Phase 2 environmental investigation. Under the law, under Article 56, there is a program where if you qualify, you can get state aid to help you with these cleanup costs, up to 90%. That's what we've done before. But do you want to do 10% of 2.8 million? You know, I mean, that's a big number. But it seems to me that there's a couple of threshold questions that would have to be answered here. Number one, I think there's some more environmental study that has to be done on these properties, so that's additional cost. But number two, I think there's a threshold question that has to be answered in concert with DEC. Believe it or not, does the contamination that the engineers have identified, does that qualify under Article 27 as contamination for purposes of this investigative restorative matter? On the Johnsburg parcel that we're going to be talking about, no question. But based upon what I read, as far as the contamination, the junk, if you will, I'm not sure that they found so far tangible evidence that would say to DEC, yeah, this qualifies for contamination under Article 27, and as a result, we're willing to fund up to 90% of a restorative project. I say fund loosely. Reimburse up to 90% of a project. So you would have to outlay the funds first and then seek reimbursement of that. So I think there's still some fundamental basic questions that we have here. What's in that soil? What are those other areas disclosed? If I'm DEC, I'm going to want answers to all of that. And then we go to DEC and say, does this qualify under Article 27, and if so, what can we get in return? So there's some real questions that have to be answered here, I think, before we go any further, if we want to go further.
I mean, they're saying in the report, the identified waste mass consisted mainly of broken glass bottles, ash, wood, and metal fragments,
Right,
with some locations containing plastic containers.
right.
None of that sounds like really hazardous waste. Is that the
Well,
criteria of the hazardous
I
waste?
think
They
this is-
also said including metal drums, containers.
But what's in those metal drums and containers?
Right.
Chairman,
Yeah. Yes.
the point I think that Martin's trying to make is, we need to do a little bit more testing on this site, then sit down with the DEC and say, okay, does this meet your criteria for being a contaminated site? I mean, if they say that it's just garbage, and there's not any environmental hazards there, then we could foreclose on it and get rid of it. I mean, if they're gonna give it, you know, just say, okay, there's nothing there that's gonna cause a problem, that could be the solution. Or if they say, yeah, there is something, then we're just gonna have to back away from it.
But remember the reason why we did the incidents of ownership. We did the incidents of ownership within the foreclosure action so that we don't acquire any
I want to
liability.
get in the chain of title.
We don't want to get in the
liability.
chain of title, so I think we need to be careful.
Absolutely.
You know, one thought I had when I was reviewing this report is maybe before we do any additional testing, maybe we want to meet with DEC and say, this is what we've got. What do you think so far? Do you think we should do some more testing? Do we have the funding available to do that, Mike?
That's what I would like to do. I would like to sit down with the DEC on this one and the Johnsburg one, which we're gonna discuss in a minute, and just see where they're at with it, what they feel, and get a gist of where we need to go for the next step. Do they want more testing? Then we can do that. I don't wanna spend more money on a site in Hague where the potential cleanup is $2 million unless I can see something down the road that we're gonna get back from that.
But it wouldn't the, first of all, fundamental question be to the engineer, how'd you come up with that number? What's in your brain or your science that
Well, it's laid right out in there. I mean, they put it so many yards.
doesn't
so
sound
many
like it
dollars.
though, just doesn't read that way to me.
Well, when I read, there's a cost analysis sheet in there that breaks it down. So many yards at the X number of dollars a yard to remove, all of that stuff is all laid out in their estimate. I'm not saying that their figure is right, don't get me wrong, but they've laid it out in a cost analysis sheet that this is what it's gonna cost, based on the findings of it.
almost all of it is the disposal of 13,000 tons at $150 a ton. Then they tack down a 25% contingency, which all by itself is over $568,000. I mean, it's just those two items are the big estimates.
When you clean up a site like this, or any site, you never really know how much it's gonna cost until you actually start doing the work.
Yeah.
It could be $500,000, it could be $3 million.
But as they go, they may find.
But looking at these photos, you really don't even see much in the way of garbage or,
No, there isn't much on the site, except for a couple of cars, some barrels, some tires, a couple of, I think there's one or two mobile homes. Most of the stuff is all buried.
mhm.
Assuming nobody wants to clean it up, what's the story then? Which means you wouldn't be able to sell it.
I think it stays in
What do you,
limbo.
what do you, put a fence around it, yeah?
I mean, well, we could
Yeah.
put a fence around it because
We don't own
I
it.
see.
How close to the lake is it?
Oh, it's up on the top of the hill, up on top of, up in.
Put a fence around it, close it, cheaper.
I think so.
Our ownership interest is temporary
Temporary.
and limited only to the point where we're allowed to enter the property to do environmental testing, for no other purposes.
But we're here because they're not paying the taxes.
That's the idea. We started a foreclosure action because they haven't paid the taxes.
We walk away from it, they're not paying the taxes.
Well, we've already declared it, tax exempt.
Small
back
price
in
of
No,
back.
it's
2011.
exempt parcel. There
Because
is
there's-
14,
just to
almost
stop the meter from
15,000, but we're not letting that move forward.
Just looking at these test pit logs, it just doesn't look like there's
But there
much of
was,
anything that's
there was
hazardous.
still
That's
more
my-
that they weren't able to
that's
get
my
to.
That's my concern, is
Yeah.
that I think you've got a lot of junk there, but does it meet the hazardous contamination definition under Article 27?
Right.
And if it doesn't, there's no way, under this program, in any event, there's no way DEC is going to fund that.
Right. But
And
even if DEC funds it, are we gonna be willing to fund, what is it, almost $300,000?
you're gonna have to come up with,
$284,000.
you're not gonna
You
get
have to come up with
whatever the
90.
final cost is, you're not gonna get reimbursed for 10% of that.
We have to come up with
I don't see
all
us
of
spending $284,000 on it.
It's been
Either.
sitting since the sixties is when it was closed. So I mean, you know, the whole purpose of this is to try to find out what is actually in the ground there, find out whether or not there is debris and everything else. We found that out. I still think, like Martin said, the next step is to sit down with the DEC and see what they feel the results of these are. Do we need to do more? Is this conclusive enough for them? Worst case scenario, nothing happens and we just go forward the way we've been going right now. The property was declared tax exempt in 2011 to stop the meter from running because they were not gonna pay the taxes. And it was ridiculous for the county to have to reimburse the school district and the town every year for taxes. So we made it, tax exempt. So if, you know, there isn't cleanup money and we don't wanna spend the money and the value of the property's in the $20,000 to $30,000 range, if it's pristine and clean, we just walk away.
But even if we get an opinion from DEC that it's clean, and we try to sell the property, I certainly wouldn't wanna be a buyer of property
No, I
that
wouldn't either.
we've only done some test pits on, and we don't know what is involved there, and then if we get in the chain of title, then we've
Down
got
the road,
liability.
we have a problem, yes.
And then the other thing that I should point out is that, you know, these programs under this article of the ECL, Article 56, you have to have contaminated property,
Right.
and there's other criteria too. There's criteria that you're supposed to meet, and in order to get funding, and one of those criteria seems to me, as I recall, criteria, the department shall determine the eligibility of an environmental restoration project for state assistance under this title based upon the following criteria. A, the benefit to the environment realized by the expeditious remediation of the property proposed to be subject to such project. B, the economic benefit to the state by expeditious remediation of the property proposed to be subject to such project. C, this is the one that Mike, we would really need to talk to DEC about, because listen to this. The potential opportunity of the property proposed to be subject to such project to be used for public recreational purposes. We don't have that here. So, is the other fact, you know, and then it goes on to talk about brownfield opportunities, so this is something different than the brownfield opportunities, but it seems to me that at least under this temporary incidence of ownership status that we have, in order to fund an environmental restoration project, I think they have in mind that there's gonna be some type of public recreational benefit here. That's not gonna happen with this property.
No, I don't think so, and I think, you know, we've had a few of the others like this in the county, and actually about an eighth of a mile down the road from the parcel in Johnsburg was another general store with gasoline pumps, found contaminated soil. The DEC came in and cleaned it up, they put a lien against the property for approximately $100,000, and it's still sitting out there. That's probably gonna be in the, foreclosure next year, because the people will stop paying taxes on it, so we're gonna have to address that then. The Johnsburg, or the Hague one, it's a little tiny piece of property up on the top of the mountain that has no value. We tested it just to make sure that we knew what was there. Like I said, I think we just need to sit down with the DEC and say to them, okay, this is what we preliminarily found in our phase 2. What do you suggest? Is this gonna meet your criteria? Do we need to go to another step? Whatever. I think that's the best course for that one.
But even if they say, yeah, it meets our criteria, I mean, is anybody here going to be willing to say we'll spend $280,000 on that, well, lay out $2.8 million, get back 90% of it and still be out $280,000? I
The property
don't see it.
is only worth, they're saying the market value isn't even $25,000 on it.
Yeah.
So, there's no, I mean, it's a
And then if they say that it's not hazardous waste, you know, you try to market it. Okay, we're gonna try to market something that's on top of a mountain on something called Dump Road that may be contaminated.
Well, the bottom
I
line
don't
is,
see a lot of buyers out there.
the reality of the situation is that we're not gonna ask them to do anything with this property, and it's gonna sit there. Because the economics of trying to fix the problem there are just prohibitive from anything being done. That's the bottom line. It's just gonna sit there the way it's been sitting since the 60s, and it's just gonna, there's nothing you can do. I mean, we've done the testing to make sure that that is the case. That's why I'm saying, let's sit down with the DEC, see where they wanna go with it, see if they have any thoughts on it, and then my personal opinion is, it's not gonna go anywhere. It's just gonna sit there for infinitum. It's a piece of dirt holding the earth together.
I think we should just walk away from it.
Yeah.
Did the test, you found out what you wanted, that you don't want it.
Yeah, I just don't see a good outcome
3,000 yards.
No.
in anything we've discussed so far. I mean, we haven't had any complaints, there's no evidence that it's polluting water or wells downstream or down slope, no. I don't know. I mean, isn't that one of our options, do nothing?
I love that approach.
I still think we ought to talk with the DEC about that and make sure that they're aware
I do too.
Yeah.
of the phase, of the testing that we've done and so forth. But the reality is, yeah, we should probably do nothing with this.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we at least meet with DEC, see if they have some magic solution, and see if they say it's eligible, at least we'll know. It doesn't sound like from this report that they're gonna say it's eligible.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's in doubt, it
Right.
really is.
Who's the we?
Excuse me?
You said we, who's the we?
Well,
I
yes.
envision Mike, Lexi, and myself going to making a meeting,
Mhm.
scheduling a meeting with DEC.
Okay, I don't think we need any resolution on it, do we? Okay, so you wanna talk about the other one, the Johnsburg site?
How big was that?
Do I?
I get passionate about this one.
Okay.
You want the garage, right?
I want it cleaned up. I've been dealing with that property for 25 years.
So this is west of Weavertown?
It's right at the four
Downtown
corners.
Johnsburg.
What is that, South Johnsburg Road, up
Well,
Mountain Road,
It's
and
at the corner of Route 8 and Mountain Road and South Johnsburg Road, right in the hamlet of Johnsburg.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
for all the old timers who used to be a car dealer.
This one, I kinda think currently as it's overassessed, but, they're saying the market value on it is $100,000. Maybe if it was in great condition and it was actually a running establishment.
Mhm.
It's only .77 of an acre. And when I looked through the report, I mean, there's tire removal, and containerized hazardous material removal price quotes are for $20,600. And cost to remove stockpiled soil and debris piles is estimated at $40,000. Then you have to remember there's plus removal and disposal of the tanks that are in the ground that they have found, and, the building would have to be demoed, and those amounts right now have not been determined. Some of the ground wasn't accessible, due to debris. They did find, 2 underground storage tanks were identified in the front of the building. Another possible underground tank was identified near the back left corner of the building. A buried drainage structure or possible dry well type structure identified in the front left of the building. And let's see, there were several geoprobe locations, were installed around the perimeter of the building where access was available. There was piles of wood, tires, soil mixed with debris, as well as extremely saturated conditions towards the rear of the building, and that limited the, rig access for the geoprobe. It was necessary to omit no, never mind that one. Multiple attempts were made in, some of these areas. In the book here, I know Jean's looking at the map, and it'll show the different, probing areas. And they were trying to determine the soil conditions. They did indicate the presence of petroleum odors. There were some lab results, and compares these results with New York State DEC regulatory standards for cleanup soil. Contaminants identified are consistent with older degraded oil spills, not necessarily a leaking gas tank.
There's a lot of containers inside the garage too.
Yes. They do feel that further testing is needed, 'cause contamination was found. And they're saying that the cleanup would definitely exceed the value of the property. The price quotes for the removal of the tires and the containerized that I gave you was the $20,600, and the stockpiled soil and debris pile is estimated at $40,000. And like Mike said, this has been going on for how many years?
I've
Like
been
this
doing
location?
20 years, or there was 20 years. Get that out there. I have some concerns about this because there's standing water behind the building, and everything runs downhill from the rear of the building to the front of the building. They did state in the report that the water runoff could be getting into a small drainage type brook on the other side of the road, which runs right by a bunch of wells. There's people next door to the property. Their well is about 30 feet from one of those test holes that says that there's petroleum-based contaminants in the soil. This is a mess. And they didn't even get into the building to test their drain sites within the building, but the building is so unstable that they did not go inside to test the floor drains to see what was in those. My recommendation is the same with the Hague one. Let's sit down with DEC with what we have. I also wanted to state, and I forgot, that in September of 2011, DEC was planning on going in and cleaning this site up. I had a letter from them when I was director of real property. They swore to us that they were gonna do that, and they never did anything. I had no idea why. They stopped returning my phone calls about 2 years ago on it. So, DEC is aware of this situation. They don't know to the extent because they haven't done the testing that we've done. But I still, Martin, unless you disagree, I think this is another one we need to include in the conversation with DEC and see where we stand with any kind of a program to see what we can do to get it cleaned up.
Chairman?
Yes.
I agree. Unlike the Hague property, I think this one stands a reasonably good chance of qualifying under Article 27. I think that we should sit down with DEC now, and see what type of restorative programs are available. If they want us to do more testing, we can bring that back and see, what the cost of that is. But, the question becomes is, like with any of these things, I don't know, certainly the Hague parcel with the extraordinary cost there, I get that. But I don't know that the temporary incidence of ownership and the environmental restorative project program, I don't know that we should necessarily be saying, are we ever going to get a reasonable return on our investment? I think the idea of the program is to clean these properties up, get them back on the tax rolls, and you have to look at the long range plan here for that. So while we know right now it's at least $60,000 to clean this up, right? At least.
At least, and
there's going to be more testing, and that $60,000 doesn't include the removal and disposal of the underground storage tanks, as I understand this report. So there's more work to be done. There's more costs that are going to be incurred. I think when I look at this property, I think this property was exactly the type of property that is what they had in mind, what the legislature had in mind when they set up this program. That's what I think.
Well, it's not really clear to me what their cost estimate is, because they don't have the table like they have in the
Yeah, you've got it.
the Hague property. You just got three things that total
Right.
$60,000.
Which comes a little over $60,000.
Yeah.
I think I suspect the reason why they did it that way is because they list those other items that have to be done.
Right.
And they don't give you a cost estimate for that, because they don't have enough information about it.
But those items are not part of the phase 2?
Well, what happened was to kind of save us a little bit of money, we broke the phase 2 into an A and a B section. Basically was to have them come in, do some test boring, see what was there, and give us an estimate on what it would cost to clean up what was visible on the site. All right, well, this is A part of it. The B part of it would be that we would have to pay additional funds for this to determine how much it's going to cost to take care of the tanks, ground contamination, and all of that stuff. All right, so that's why there really isn't an estimate for that part of it.
Well, so the steps are to meet with DEC, and then if the indications are that it is eligible for the program, go forward with further testing regarding underground storage tanks and this dry well, generally. Right? Is that what we're thinking?
I think the answer to that is yes, and I think we just sort of get their initial reaction and.
Yeah.
All right, and I'd like to add just one more. I know that we aren't discussing the Queensbury parcel because the report on that was preliminary. We're expecting that to come back sometime soon. They've already indicated that there is some problems on the Queensbury site. I would request that we also be allowed to take that Queensbury report to this meeting with DEC to discuss that, even though we haven't had an official discussion here in the committee. But I can tell you from reading the preliminary report, there are some problems on that site.
Right.
So I would ask that we also include, do you have a problem with that, Martin?
No, that's the 275 Bay Road property, right?
So we're talking to them about, if we get them to sit down at the table, I want to talk to them about all of them at once, rather than trying to piecemeal.
The other thing is whether they have money they have money appropriated in their budget to deal with these things.
I have no idea.
'Cause they might say it's eligible, but we don't have any money. We can find out when. Okay, we don't really need any other resolution on this, right? Okay, any committees satisfied with that approach? Okay. Okay, any other business for the committee? If not, motion to adjourn. Dennis, Peter, all in favor? Aye.
Bingo bongo. Because it's garbage.
Thank you.
I don't